Hello and welcome back to my studio. Today we're going to be drawing a realistic drawing of this teaspoon. I've sketched out the outline and also printed out the reference material to follow. I like to use this little brush. It sweeps away particles so that you don't have to use your fingers in your work. I also like this little sanding pad. You can get this from hardware stores or art supply stores, and it's great for a couple of reasons: for sharpening pencils, but mostly I use it to add some graphite in, and I use it with these blending stumps. And these blending stumps are indispensable in any kind of drawing work, in my opinion. I only really use about 3 pencils. I use an H and a 2B and an HB, but you can just use one pencil. HB would be good. And I love this handheld razor. It's battery operated, spins around, and is great for getting into little areas. The surface that I use is a Strathmore Bristol smooth paper. This is really thick and it is super smooth. So we've got the outline in. Oh, and I like to use this Kneaded eraser too. You can get it to a point, but I like to use 2 erasers, and that's all we really need, honestly, for this project. Make sure you keep your pencils nice and sharp all the time, and we're going to begin by putting in the perimeter of the spoon. We really don't need to apply very much pressure at all in this whole project. As a matter of fact, we want light lines, clean lines, consistent lines, and an even pressure throughout. And the reason for this is it's so much easier to add more graphite than it is to try to take it away. This is a great beginner project because we're really just looking at 3 values here: a light value, a medium value, and a darker value. It's also a great beginning project because it's really small. So the first thing that we're really doing after the perimeter is we're getting some of the basic shapes in, and we really want to pay a lot of attention to that reference material all the time, so that's why I'm keeping it really close. I probably spend about 50% of my time looking at the sketch pad and 50% of the time looking at the reference material, and the reason for this is the brain seems to think it knows what it sees, but it can trick us. So in the beginning it is just really a great idea to just follow along, keep looking at the reference material, keep those layers really, really light, and we're not going to worry about any inconsistencies that we might see as we go along. For instance, any striping that's that we see here, or any areas where it's really not very smooth, because the blending stump will help out with all of that and make it really, really smooth. The blending stumps are great. I sometimes use a fat one and I sometimes use a thin one, and they're great because they have points. They last for ages, they're really cheap, and you can buy them in packs of assorted sizes, and you can get them anywhere. So here the blending stump is doing a lot of the work for us. Our hand can contain oils really quickly even after we wash them, and it is very tempting to smooth out with the fingers, but if you can get into the habit, which can be difficult at first, to use the blending stump, it can become quickly your best friend. I do recommend a really good quality paper, because our work is really only as good as the tools that we use. So it's tempting to just use some printer paper or just use a cheap sketch pad, but the smooth paper allows for the better blending. And you don't need to go out and buy a really great huge pad. You can just buy a smaller one, but it will make everything a lot less frustrating, and it'll keep you inspired once you see that the quality of your work is so much better with quality materials. So as you can see, I'm going in very, very, very lightly, and where the darkest value is, we can apply a lot more pressure here. There are a few details in this area, so we want to pay close attention to those. We don't want to cover all of those areas with the dark value, because it will make it very hard to erase those tiny areas using our erasers. So work your way around those highlights or reflections, and again paying close attention to the reference. And we're going to be putting some shading in to add to the hyperrealism, so that the teaspoon actually looks like it's resting on the page as opposed to free floating. We can use that blending stump in a circular fashion, or we can go up and down, but keep it moving all the time. And you can see how a little bit of graphite with the blending stump goes a really long way. We want to preserve those highlights along the side of the spoon, and we're putting our darks down. And we can always keep refining our work if we keep all of our layers really, really light. This would also be a great project using charcoal pencils. So you can see as the work develops, we're really using our blending stump almost more than we're using our pencil, perhaps 50-50. And we keep smoothing and smoothing and smoothing and smoothing. And you can take a little bit of the graphite from that darker value area there on the left and add it into the handle of the spoon. And we want to preserve that lower left highlight, that little shine on the end of the spoon. We're working our way around rounded corners. And we're using the tip of the blending stump. You can use the side of the blending stump when you're using larger areas, but I think this image was only 4x6 or at most 5x7. I think it was 4x6. You can see how quickly this all comes together. I've only really sped this up a little bit just so that you don't have to watch the whole thing, but that you still get the general idea of how exactly it works in case you want to follow along step by step with me. I think in the early stages of beginning with any kind of artwork, it makes it so much easier, not only if you have your reference material right next to you, but if you have both the reference material and your artwork the same size. And graphite is a really good medium to use when you're using shiny surfaces or anything metallic. We want to keep all of those edges really clean. Keep wiping away the particles so that you don't smear your work. And now I'm using a smaller, finer blending stump just to get into all those teeny tiny little edges. It's easy to think we're finished, but usually most work needs some further refining before we can say we're done. Sometimes what I do when I'm working is I squint a lot. It helps to see those values a whole lot more clearer. And then I look at the piece and I say, what other things can I do to help improve the drawing? Can I add some darker darks? Can I go in and erase some of the darker areas? Could I smooth a bit more with the blending stump? What else can I do to make this piece as realistic as possible? I think this is a great beginner's project because it only takes an hour or two to do. It only has 3 values, light, medium and dark. It only requires 1 pencil, a couple of erasers, a couple of blending stumps, and of course the surface that you're working on. Be sure to use the kneaded eraser to erase any areas around the outside of your drawing, and we're all done. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next video.